Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I hope you've got your coffee ready and that you're excited for today's session. But let's just jump right into it. So there's some of you will know me. I'm Celia Denton. I'm the owner of PTES Consulting. We do psychometric assessment on a daily basis. And as part of that, we've identified that often we need training and coaching on the different management levels that we have. We've got junior guys, we've got middle level leaders, and then we've got executive leaders. And out of the assessment, you can see what type of needs it is that you have. Some of you may have attended my stress management training or the emotional intelligence training. Whatever it is, keep an eye out on these invites for the webinars, because there's really very interesting topics and it's very relevant for the time that we are in right now. So I'm glad that all of you are here. I think there's a reason why you're here. So let's start today's session with some very interesting things and some interesting examples. Let's look at examples of poor leadership. So let's look at real world examples. So here you'll see a few pictures and you may be wondering what this is about, but we're going to touch on BP Oil, Kodak, Enron, and Uber. So most of those names you will recognize. Okay, so let's look at Kodak as an example. So I think a lot of you will know that Kodak was at one stage quite a brand name. It was a household name. They've gone all quiet. Let's see why. So leadership failed to act on the rise of digital photography despite having early access to technology. Resistance to change and a lack of strategic vision caused the company to lose market dominance and eventually declare bankruptcy. So that's what happened to them. And I know growing up, they were quite a prominent name. So if you think about it, you don't hear or see them anymore, and it's because they went bankrupt. Right, let's look at another example of poor leadership. If I mix my words, it's because I had very strong coffee this morning that was absolutely fantastic. So it's a small price to pay. Anyway, so let's look at BP Oil. In 2010, the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill was one of the biggest environmental disasters ever. And it was off the coast of the United States, in the Gulf of Mexico. I'm going to show you a picture. It's absolutely horrendous. Just quite a while ago, but it was an incredibly horrendous incident that happened. So the reason for this was inadequate leadership in risk management and safety oversight contributed to one of the largest environmental disasters in the history. So decisions prioritizing cost and speed over safety had catastrophic consequences for the company. That's why you will see I put a picture of the Titanic here, you know, the movie where it's the same thing that happened there. It was prioritizing cost and speed over safety. That's why they hit the iceberg. And in this situation with the oil spill, it is a similar thing that happened there. They overlooked safety concerns, and it resulted in this oil spill. So in 2016, BP agreed to pay 20 billion in fines because it was the largest environmental damage settlement ever in the United States. That's horrible. Let me show you a picture. This is what it looked like. This is actually the picture of what it looked like. It's absolutely horrendous. But if you take it back, if you trace it back, it was poor leadership, poor risk management. So that leadership really can go, it's not just your people management, it's overlooking rules and policies, going too fast and too quick. The same happened with Facebook. We won't go into that example right now, but the same happened to Facebook. They moved too fast. Then let's look at Enron. So Enron, it's leadership engaged in unethical practices, fostering a culture of deception and short-term profit seeking. Lack of ethical oversight in this case and accountability led to one of the largest corporate collapses in history, affecting thousands of employees and investors. Enron was a US energy company that collapsed in 2001 due to massive accounting fraud, which hid billions in debt and led to the largest bankruptcy in US history. That happens all the time. It happened again in 2008. There's just such a pattern. It's like Lord of the Rings, when people see the ring, it's like they go all, they can't see clearly, they get hypnotized. So the company's downfall resulted in thousands of job losses and pension savings for employees and the jailing of several executives. And it led to the creation of new laws and an FBI investigation. When you look at pension losses, that is just horrendous. It's just terrible. Let's look at the guys responsible and let's look at the profiles. So these are the PACEs. So firstly, let's look at the top guy, Jeffrey Skilling and Kenneth Lay. So Kenneth Lay and Jeffrey Skilling exhibited a complex mix of personality traits that fostered Enron's innovative but ultimately toxic and fraudulent culture. It often starts off with incredible innovation and creativity and drive and energy. But you have to keep an eye on the way that you move then, the way that you move forward, because it can become really, it can go really well. And then when we mix that entrepreneurial spirit and it moves too quickly and too fast and it starts blurring the lines, that's when it becomes a problem. So these psychological profiles, though not formally diagnosed, but it suggests a high degree of narcissism, ambition, lack of empathy, and a profound inability to take responsibility for actions. Isn't that often the profiles that we see? But then again, sometimes people are just so creative and driven, and then the lines gets blurred. But in this case, there are traces of that narcissism, the selfishness, not thinking about anyone else, not thinking of the consequences. Because if you work with people's pensions, my gosh, you can create a lot of damage when you don't consider other people. Always consider other people. That research tells us that selfish people don't know that they're selfish. So it's not like it's something that you want to work with or develop because you don't think you have it. That's a very big problem. So always ask yourself, do you consider other people? What does it mean to have empathy? Can you put yourself in someone else's shoes? And that does not mean that you are a soft person. Can you put yourself in their shoes? It's got nothing to do with softness. Right, let's look at Uber. Did you know that this was going on in Uber? I had no idea until I did the research. So Uber is okay now, but in the early years, the one of the first directors, I think he was actually one of the owners, he was Travis Kalanick. I don't know how you pronounce his name, but Travis Kalanick. He was aggressive. Unstructured leadership fostered a toxic culture, created a lot of legal issues and public scandals. So he was also very entrepreneurial, creative, driven, ambitious, but it went too far. So while the company grew rapidly, poor leadership damaged the reputation and that necessitated major organizational restructuring. Let's look at this guy, quite an attractive guy, and his personality profile, psychological profile, as inferred from his public behavior and leadership at Uber, suggests a personality defined by intense drive, competitiveness, assertiveness, and a win-at-all-costs mentality. Listen, that entrepreneurial spirit, you need to have a winning spirit, a driving spirit, and you look at all options and you're quite cutthroat. That is normal, it's good, it's okay, but without the empathy and without just looking at how you're affecting other people, it tips over into the negative. So competitiveness is good, but at which point does it become toxic and it becomes derailing? So he exhibits traits often associated with an autocratic leadership style. It's quite interesting, and has been described as having narcissistic tendencies, lacking in empathy. Often one main reason that often with entrepreneurs you find this combination. So where are the good people? So good people will also have very competitive traits, drive, energy. But if you are really incredibly narcissistic and you only think of yourself, it could be hidden. It could be hidden as competitiveness or drive. So always keep an eye on the way that you manage and drive. That selfishness is a very ugly trait. But anyway, this is how he was described as. They did get rid of him at the end of the day. I think they forced him to resign. So in the junior leadership training, we actually touch on that in terms of what happened, what did they do with him, and how they dealt with it. But I think at the end of the day, he was forced to resign, and now things up. It's running pretty well. So it shows you that those changes does help. All right, let's look at why do we develop junior leaders. So we're going to look at junior leaders, your middle level, and then your executives. So you want to start empowering and upskilling your junior leadership, because this would be building foundational leadership skills, equipping them with the basic management, communication, and problem-solving abilities needed to lead teams effectively. And so many times when we do the training, it comes back to communication. Communication upwards, downwards, sideways, communication, and the way that you communicate. We need to teach people this. I've seen it now again in a company where I'm helping, where it's quite a senior manager. They have such a need for the communication. And the very executive leaders at the top don't actually even realize it. So it's so incredibly critical. It's just very important, and never ever neglect the importance of it and the way that you communicate. Then enhancing decision-making capabilities. So preparing them to make informed, timely, and responsible decisions. And this is often the decision-making at this level starts off quicker. The more higher you go, the more discretion is applied in your role, the more ambiguous your role gets. Often you need to step back, observe, and consider your options first before you just make decisions. You need to start training people early on around this. Often when people make impulsive decisions, it's because they want to escape their situation. They panicked and they want to escape. Not always, but sometimes. And then ensuring alignment with organizational goals. This is one of the most important things. You make your decisions based on what is it that is strategic strategy, and what are the goals? What do we need? How do we get there? Helping them understand company strategy, culture, and expectations early in the career. So I had an interesting thing this week where someone said to me that so they've allowed all the input from the teams and people below them and the subordinates. So they allowed them to put their ideas and their thoughts on the table. But now what? You can't satisfy everyone's input. So when you get input, you will formulate it as such. You will tell people, we are gathering information because we want to inform this decision. We can't always say, we want to help you make the decision, because we still need to take the input that we get and align it with the strategy. Therefore, the input that you get, you want to welcome the input, but you can't always use it, because the first thing you need to do is take that input and how does it align to your organizational goals and to your strategic vision. And that's how you take that information and you want to align it. Once again, clear communication around it so that people know, okay, my input was valued, it was taken. At this stage, we maybe didn't use it or apply it, but it's because of X, Y, and Z. And people appreciate that feedback. Then, point number 4, increasing engagement and retention. Showing investment in their growth fosters loyalty and motivation. So this is also what you will get if people can see that you're trying to develop them and you are selecting younger people for possible leadership, preparation, and identifying that potential. You will get loyalty and motivation. but continuously communicating what your intentions are. Then creating a talent pipeline. This is also important. Developing future leaders to fill middle and senior management positions, ensuring long-term organizational continuity. Don't think that this is only for very large organizations. You need it in your smaller and medium-sized organizations as well. And then improving team performance. Trained junior managers can guide their teams more effectively, boosting productivity and morale. But always communicate your intention. What is it that you are trying to do? You don't have to make promises and make promises that you can't keep. You want to just prepare, look for your potential, and communicate it as such. Why develop middle managers? So let's look at that. So your middle level managers are developed to bridge strategy and execution, because now they are incorporating more of the operational goals and the theory. They need to start bridging that and ensuring the execution of it. They translate the organizational goals into actionable plans, lead teams effectively, drive performance, and ensure alignment between senior leadership and the frontline employees. That's the way that you move forward. You need to know what is your strategy. Your middle managers and your junior managers need to know what is the strategy. Even your practical executors that's on ground floor level, they need to know what is the vision, what's the pathway to your success. What is it? How far are we? Are we achieving some of the goals? Are we achieving it in a real good manner? Whatever the communication is, communicate that. And then developing them enhances decision making, problem solving, people management, change leadership, creating a strong pipeline for future leaders, future senior leaders, while boosting overall organizational efficiency and engagement. So whichever role you fulfill, whether you are in HR, whether you are very senior or middle or low, it doesn't matter. Always make sure that you understand who needs communication from you. Take responsibility for that and engage and communicate. We often think, but people, they should know. But how do people know if we don't communicate it? You need to create that openness. Even if you over communicate, that's better than communicating too little. Right. Why develop senior and executive managers? Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Now we're going to start to include cognitive, emotional, social factors that influence leadership effectiveness. So I've listed here the most important factors for you. When we present training, we usually customize it to what it is that your organization needs. And we also use very good examples, real life examples, so that you can see what does it actually mean. You know, there are so many buzzwords out there, doesn't it just irritate you sometimes? Like these big buzzwords. But we need to look at real life examples and what does it actually mean. So let's look at self-awareness and emotional intelligence, one of my most favorite topics. And you can flesh this out in way more detail. So this would be the understanding of one's strengths, weaknesses, triggers, and impact on others. Helps executives to lead authentically and manage complex interpersonal dynamics. Let's say your narcissistic, very self-absorbed people possibly don't care. But we can't just assume that there's narcissists and people lacking empathy in senior positions. We need to make them aware, teach them, train them. And you want to know your own weaknesses, your own triggers, and that of others in order to manage people well. I also believe you can develop someone at any point and any age. I think things are sometimes ingrained, but I do think that you can still develop and grow at any age. Then decision making under uncertainty. So this is a very important one. The higher up you go with your decision making and the complexity of tasks, the more discretion you may need to apply because your environment becomes very uncertain. So executives faces high stakes, ambiguous and changing situations. Psychological development enhances your critical thinking, your judgment, and your risk tolerance. So if you are in a very senior position and you often feel flustered, stressed and pressured, look at your environment, your situation. Often the things that you deal with, it's ambiguous, it's vague. You don't know what it is. It's not tangible. The more operational you are, the easier it is. I'm not saying that it's not difficult and it doesn't take hard work, but once you can't touch something, see it in black and white, it requires of you that discretion and the adaptability in a situation where you don't know what's going to happen. So practice your own flexibility and flexibility and adaptability. Step back and say, I don't know, and I'm not going to know. And I need to apply my own flexibility in this situation. And maybe I need to step back, analyze first, and consider all my options before just jumping in like we used to do when we were very operational. So different situations and levels have got different levels that you need to deal with it and different ways that you need to deal with it. I'm not saying that the one is more important than the other. I'm trying to describe the type of aspects that you are going to face. This is what you need to train your senior managers on. Then motivation and values alignment, awareness of personal and organizational values drives purpose, commitment, and ethical leadership. We need to know what that is. And don't just give performance feedbacks. Make people aware of the values. Where are we going to? Who are we? And what do we stand for? Then, very importantly again, resilience and stress management. Developing coping strategies for pressure, setbacks, rapid change, and that will sustain high performance. Can you see the rapid change again? Rapid change is the thing that we're not really ready for. That's the thing that causes impulsive decision-making, very high stress, conflict. Prepare yourself for that so that you can settle in that chair, settle in it and deal with it in that way. But we need to prepare ourselves for that. Because a lot of us, all of us, we come from very hands-on operational, and then you grow towards the more strategic, the more intangible, the more changing, ambiguous. That's just how it goes. And we go through that with age and experience, and we equip ourselves as we go along. So social cognition and influence. Executives must navigate complex networks, motivate diverse teams, manage stakeholders. Psychological insight strengthens persuasion, negotiation, and team dynamics. And you need to be open, flexible, adaptable, understand people. Can you see how your own stress management fits in here? How your own emotional awareness fits in here? You need to be able to cover everything from all angles. And then growth mindset and learning agility. So executives who embrace continuous learning adapt better to change and foster innovation. So you want to be able to be open and learn. And even if you've got your own habits and ways of doing, you are never too old to go and entertain. What does that openness mean? What does that discretion? What does it mean to be open to the change and changing dynamics and adapting to different people's styles and different people's way of engaging with them? Right. This is the introduction to the development of your junior, your middle, and your executive managers. So at the moment, you will see that you can contact us for doing the training online. We are currently moving to a more optimal online portal. So in the meantime, while we are waiting for this to go online, you can contact us for webinar type of training, online type of training like we've done today. We also customize the training for you. I hope to see you in the next webinar when we've got some informative information on emotional intelligence and stress management.